I am sending him. We're not, or at least I don't know about him. I am not gonna. I guess let you hear whatever like the equivalent of show you, would be the jingle we're working on until it's done. So I'm sending him the audio of just me, like kind of giving him the melody with the words, and he's gonna see if he can put some guitar behind it, and if he can send me that separately, then I can layer that, and I think I can just as easily like put a quick little drum track behind it, and if his guitar notes aren't that complicated, like my feel for it is like real just kind of like I think it's only like 15 seconds long.
Okay.
So like in my head, I'm just thinking like it's kind of like crappy guitar garage band sounding. And I mean, not that it's going to be like horrible, but like it doesn't, like the point is for it to not sound, 100% polished.
Okay.
It's
a lot of work for a 15-second clip.
Dude, it's totally worth it. Totally worth it. The effort it goes into the creative process. It doesn't need to be, like I said, polished and sounding ultra professional. It's just the creative process.
So I mean, I feel like you're putting more, like, it's gonna, I feel like either way, we be using like real instruments and all that stuff, it's gonna sound like the most professional part of this podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bry Guy and Super Friends. I'm your host, Brian Labick, and the only gentleman joining me for this episode is Josh Zorge.
Oh, I don't know if I've earned that afforded title, but I will take it since there's no one else here this week to argue against it.
I mean, really, if anybody was here, they'd be a gentleman. I'm not gonna. I throw out that title.
Yeah, the fact
that
they're not, that they're in no position to take my moniker away. Screw them. Who do they think they are?
Not Kingsman, that's for sure.
Screw them.
All right, so if you haven't guessed, on this episode, we're going to get back to a good old-fashioned movie review, which we haven't done one, I think, for a while. I think the last one I did was for Spider-Man. That was back in July. So it's been like a good 2.5 months, I think. So we're due for a movie review, so this works.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about Kingsman: The Golden Circle, which actually I think oddly enough was, the first Kingsman, if I'm remembering correctly, was the first movie review I really did for a podcast. I think back when we were doing Geekologist, I think that was the first one that I covered for a show.
Oh, cool.
So it's all coming full circle, or the golden circle, if you will.
Boom.
Segues are somewhat terrible. All right, so I think Josh and I were sort of talking even before we started recording that the first Kingsman, or maybe... did we do lists for 2015 for our favorite movies? I can't remember if we went that far back or not.
Yeah, so we did favorite for 2015. We did that at the beginning of 2016, but didn't the first Kingsman come out in 2014?
Oh crap! You're gonna test my knowledge now. I'm gonna have to check IMDb. I thought, because I remember putting it. I could have sworn I remember putting Kingsman on a like a favorites list of mine, so I thought it had to have been 2015, but now I'm not sure.
Nope, you are right. No, that's because I always messed that up because IMDb, like the official tag they put on is 2014. That's probably when it first had its premiere or something, but no, you are right. Its initial like worldwide release was February 2015, so okay. I stand corrected and look like a schmuck already this early into the show.
You take your time to course correct us after, when you're listening to it and have time to look everything up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I know it was on my list. Do you remember if it was on, I'm assuming it was on your list too for 2015, which I don't have readily available because I don't think I wrote all that shit down back whenever we did it.
Yeah,
And I never actually took the time to go back and listen to that episode to see if it was who else talked about that movie.
I don't know if I even have that anymore. I definitely still have my 2016 lists of like anticipated for 2016, favorites of 2016. I don't think I go back that far. I don't think I kept my documents from that far.
Okay. Either way, it was one of my favorites from 2015. Josh and I had The Golden Circle on both of our most anticipated for 2017 lists. I think actually we tied. I think we're both number 6 for that one.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do have that list with me. I don't know if anybody else actually had this movie that they were looking forward to. Oh, Mike had it. Romano had it on his number 9.
Okay, respectable.
Bradley did not.
Didn't Matt? I could have sworn Matt did.
Matt did not.
Matt did not. Close. What the frick's wrong with you?
So, yeah. I guess we were the ones that, out of the 5 of us that did it, we were the ones that were most anticipating this movie.
Well, then it's apropos that we are here, because apparently no one else really cared about it.
Not enough to go see it that first weekend and come on and talk about it anyway.
No, not at all.
All right, so before we get into specifics, I'm going to assume that there's some people listening to this podcast that haven't seen the movie yet. So what we're going to try to do, we'll try to just talk general impressions of the movie, what we thought, what we can cover. I don't know, sort of like a mini review, I guess, if you want to call it that. So what are some of your general impressions of The Golden Circle?
I thought it was strong for a sequel. There was definitely some like big, huge left turns that it took at times that they wasn't seeing coming. Now, not having any exposure to the comics or graphic novel series that these are based on, I don't know how much any of the stories that they're crafting for the films adhere to any of that, or if they follow any of the major plot arcs
right
of any of those. Like I said, I think it was strong for a sequel. I think Matthew Vaughn did a good job in replicating those elements that made the first one successful and different, with meshing a lot of the different action and shooting styles, without seeming like he was just making the same movie over and again.
Right.
I mean, there was definitely a couple of beats or sequences where it nearly felt like a carbon copy of certain scenes, and we'll get into that later with the more like spoiler detailed review. But other than that, I'd say like 90 to 95% of the movie felt really solid.
Okay. Do you prefer it to the first one, or you still like the first one better?
Well, it's funny because we did not get around to watching the first one again before we went to see this the other night. Okay. And I think we had actually only watched the first movie once. Obviously we liked it a whole lot because I was looking forward to this one, but I think both, like my wife and I, Sarah, we realized about like 15 to 20 minutes into the movie, she says, I think we thought we remembered the first one a lot better than we actually do.
Yeah, because it's one thing that I didn't watch it the first one before I saw the second one either, and now I'm wishing I would have.
Yes.
Because like this one starts and it's basically expecting you to remember characters and events from the first movie.
Yes.
And I was actually a little bit surprised how closely this one ties to the first one.
Yes, but you know what? I kind of appreciated that, because other than maybe like the MCU, there's not like I kind of miss that to some degree. Like there's obviously a very strong ongoing, linear direct narrative that after the events of the events in the lives of these characters, here's where we pick up them in a little bit in the future, but things were very impactful. So there's still residuals from those first events that you saw that are still getting worked out. I think movie studios are so worried anymore to some degree about alienating an audience who hasn't seen the first movie or the previous chapter, and so we got to make a self-contained story so that we can still bring them in. Like, well no, if you're not that big of a fan, if you didn't care, like start at the like you wouldn't pick up like a Harry Potter book 4 in the middle, right. like not having read any of the previous ones.
Yeah.
Like, it just makes sense not to do that. And I think they've catered in some degrees with some franchises, just so worried to make, like I said, these like self-contained things, that I liked how much, because you felt that you still felt a strong connection to the characters because they were obviously still impacted by the events of the previous story. So you've stayed with the emotional baggage that they've carried on with them. It wasn't like you were just starting fresh again.
Right. Yeah, I think, so, with that being the case, if you're listening to this and haven't seen the first Kingsman, definitely watch that before going to see the Golden Circle. I think you'll appreciate the Golden Circle a lot more.
Very much. Definitely recommend that.
Because it's not like, this franchise, I guess we can call it a franchise now. If there's even, I guess, just two of them, that's enough. We'll call it a franchise. Or at least they probably want to get a franchise out of it. But this is probably being compared to like James Bond and that kind of spy genre stuff. James Bond, a lot of those movies you can just watch individually and they don't really connect to each other. Between the first one and this one, this is not that. I double down and say that I definitely think you need to watch the first one before watching the second one.
Agreed.
Because I think they gave... We'll get into specifically, I guess, sort of what happens when we get to the spoiler part, but they gave at least one character that was sort of a throwaway in the first one stuff to do in this one, which I liked and I appreciated that.
Very much. And I'm pretty sure I know who you're talking about this time, so...
Yeah, he opens the movie and just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I was still surprised, how quickly this movie starts.
Oh, yeah, it hits the ground running. Like, the opening sequence is, balls to the wall right away.
Yeah. I still don't know if I like that. I can't decide if I like that or not. It definitely,
caught me off guard.
You definitely... it pulls you in with that, and then, it just kind of keeps going from there, and there's not too many times to, just kind of take a breath, I don't feel like, but, yeah, I don't know, I guess maybe I'm just used to easing into things a little bit more, but, yeah, that was real quick.
It was, but, you figure in the first chapter, they already had the explanation as to how your main character gets from his beginnings to get into this organization.
Uh-huh.
Then you have the actual conflict and plot itself, and then your character arcs and your surprises and your resolutions, etc. You didn't really have to do that with your main group of characters yet. You just needed to eventually introduce the arc of the conflict. And then, what is going to be the growth of our characters as we go through this second chapter. So what I also appreciated was that the opening sequence wasn't just, and this is what I was worried about as I was watching it, it wasn't just this, several minute, stylized, cool looking thing for entertainment value. It actually played into the rest of the entire plot of the movie.
Yeah.
They basically get into the plot from the first scene.
Yeah, I guess it's similar to James Bond, cold opens.
Somewhat, yeah. But
a lot of those, are a lot of the cold opens for James Bond. There's just a snippet of a mission that has nothing to do with the overall plot. This one is
right,
and gives you that fast-paced action. Yeah, and like you were saying, it sets up the plot to move forward.
Yeah, which again, you already brought up the Bond parallel, and that's one thing that I think it sets it apart. Where the Bond film specifically will open with that to set the mood and get the movie going, and get the audience ready, so you're not starting with something slow and slumberous. But I did appreciate that while you got that, it wasn't just a throwaway scene for cool factor.
Right.
It actually did play into the story.
I don't really I'm trying to think of what else I can talk about generally, and I keep wanting to talk about specific things, so I don't know how much more we want to cover generally.
Well, I would say, okay, so if you haven't seen either of these films, or if you did see the first one, if you saw the first movie and you liked it, you will, I think, 90% chance you will really dig this sequel. If you haven't seen either of them and you're kind of curious, definitely watch the first one again. We're going to emphasize that. Watch the first one before you see this one. But it's a really cool mix of stylized action. It's a mix mash, actually, of different types of stylized action shooting with drama, with comedy, with spies, with espionage. it's a good like melting pot of genres, and I think that's why I dug the first one so much, and this carried it on, like I said, very successfully.
Yeah, if you don't know anything about these and you're looking for a James Bond equivalent that is heavy on gadgets and the fun of James Bond, and you don't want you don't want James Bourne, give these a shot, because I think they might fit what is sort of missing right now in that kind of genre.
Yeah, which I would say actually have, in my opinion, I mean, maybe not so much, the Daniel Craig Bonds got much more hardcore or gritty with the fight scenes.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you like that part of Jason Bourne, necessarily, like, the like, hand-to-hand combat and things in these movies, are actually really well done and pretty rough, I think. Like, it doesn't look like it doesn't look like a dance. It doesn't look like choreography.
At the same time, though, I think this movie is definitely like tongue in cheek, and like you can tell they're playing it up as, I don't know how to describe it other than like they're sort of having fun with it and not like taking it as deadly serious as like Daniel Craig's James Bond is.
Definitely.
So that, you know, they might have that good choreography for fight scenes and stuff like that. It's comparable to Daniel Craig's James Bond or Jason Bourne. It's just that I think they play it in a different light that I think works better, or at least for this style of movie, it works better, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that's probably, I don't know, where we're going to stop for mini review type of general impression stuff. So if you've seen the movie, we're going to go into spoilers, get into the specifics of all this stuff. So if you haven't seen it and you haven't seen the first one, go back, watch both of them, come back to us after that. Pause us now. This is your final spoiler warning for Kingsman and the Golden Circle.
Wee-oo, wee-oo, spoiler! Wee-oo, wee-oo, spoiler! You know, something like that.
All right, so we are in the spoiler zone. We can talk about any specifics from the movie we want to, which is probably where we're really going to dig into this movie. So hopefully you're still with us. So where do you want to start for specifics and spoilers?
Well, first, Marty needs to get back to the year 1955 to help make sure that his parent... No. Can we give spoilers for other movies?
I mean, I guess that's fine.
I don't know. Okay, so I would say I don't know why this jumped out at me so much, but it's above all, this is just stuck out of my head. Why was Channing Tatum in this movie?
I was thinking that he didn't have much to do.
No, like you barely even needed. You really didn't even need that character, much less an actor of that notoriety to fill it.
Actually, what I read from somebody involved with the movie, I can't remember, it might have been Taron Egerton in an interview or something like that, but
okay.
Tatum's character, Tequila, had a bigger part in the film, but due to scheduling, they had to cut him back. I actually think he was supposed to be tag teaming with Eggsy for the whole Switzerland mission.
Okay.
But because Tatum was unavailable, they wrote in somebody else to go with him.
All right. I mean, it was just a very, like, at that point, it almost, like, it really did feel, because they kept Channing Tatum in all of the trailers and previews and, like, made sure to give him billing in those, like, come see this movie, Channing Tatum's part of the cast now.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's pretty much all you see of him is in the trailer, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, he basically has, like, that one key scene where, you know, he confronts them in the distillery, and they have, like, that pretty cool fight, but...
Yeah.
Other than, well, I mean, even that, at that point, it's actually kind of short, but, I mean, then very soon after, he basically goes incapacitated, and he's out, like, literally on ice until the rest of until the end of the movie, so, I mean, it stuck out like such a sore thumb to me, that I think I was just surprised by it more than anything else.
Which I'm kind of just hoping if they do a third one, that they're just saving him for the third one.
And it felt like that last scene where, I mean, first of all, he looked ridiculous in that suit and that bowler hat.
What? I thought he looked good.
Well, he just his build, his like facial structure. I'm not saying he looked like an idiot. It just like if he wanted to be ironic,
you're jealous.
And
admit
wear,
it.
Oh yeah, like if he wanted to be ironic in real life and wear that as his Halloween costume, like Channing Tatum could do that, but. Like it just, and like I'm sure they weren't going for like the utmost seriousness when he shows up in, you know, England in that suit or whatever, but Yeah, I mean, given that, it definitely, right, it felt like that was alluding to, okay, now what is his capacity going to be with the Kingsman going forward? So yeah, hopefully in the next chapter, if that all stays connected, it will pay off.
Yeah, I'm hoping they get a third one. I think this one doesn't seem, at least from some of the reviews I was reading and listening to, this movie doesn't seem like it's getting as glowing reviews as the first one. It seems a lot more mixed.
Okay, I can see that.
So I don't know how that's going to translate to box office revenue, and if that's going to make enough for them to make a third one. I don't know if Matthew Vaughn's going to want to come back for a third one. He just traditionally doesn't do sequels at all.
Well, was he gonna? I mean, he did First Class. Wasn't he originally gonna do Days of Future Past?
He was going to do X-Men 3, and then didn't.
Right,
and they brought him back for First Class, and then he was going to do Days of Future Past.
Right.
You're right, and then he bailed from that one too.
Okay. I mean, I think, like I said, I think he did a good job without, like, just repeating himself over and over.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, if he traditionally doesn't, like, something has to bring him back, and I don't know if it's maybe just these characters in this franchise that he's a little bit more drawn to. Maybe he feels like he has a little bit more freedom with these movies than, say, an X-Men movie.
Yeah.
But again, if you get one director to sign up for a trilogy of movies, you're looking at least 6 to 7 years of their life to get 3 movies out, and some people just don't want to be tied to something for that long.
Right.
So considering he's done these two so closely together, I don't know if he'd need a break before doing a third one, if they'd get him back this quickly to do a third one, and, you know, depending on, again, what the revenue from the box office is, I don't know if they'll be looking to make a third one very soon if it doesn't make that much money.
Yeah, that's true. IMDb is listing the estimated budget at $104 million. And
all right, it's a little bit cheaper than I thought, actually.
Yeah, especially with, like, all the effects, like the shooting sequences they had. And they're saying that, like, the weekend opening box office was about $40 million.
All right, so it's not terrible.
No, and I mean, considering that, like, in its, it might even be its second weekend, but, like, it's also opening, like, I mean, for perspective, this was the third weekend that it was out, and it made almost another $30 million.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Number one, that movie is just crushing all of the movie dollars right now. And there's not a whole lot else that really came up yet to blow away the box office. I mean, you had this movie Mother open with Jennifer Lawrence, Home Again, like a romantic comedy with Reese Witherspoon is out. American Assassin opened, I think, the week before, which was actually really cool. We can talk about that another time, but I saw that. I'd check it out if anyone's interested. It was a lot better than I thought it would be. But I think, like, right now, like, a $40 million opening for this, I don't think is that bad considering how slow, like, other than it, how slow the box office is right now.
Well, that's the only thing I'm kind of thinking is, like, for an opening weekend, I think that's kind of expected, especially from people coming off the first one, thinking that's what they're getting into, and, like, they're real excited about this one, and then they come out of it with mixed feelings, and that's going to hurt the returning box office for the next couple of weeks. It might have a second coming just because it's going to get closer to Halloween the more it's in theaters, and that could see a lot more boost in revenue for that movie.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, this was another one that, like, the original, I think we talked about this several times when we talked about February and winter openings, like Deadpool in 2016, throwing Lego Batman and John Wick in February this year. The first Kingsman, The Secret Service, opened February 2015. And I don't know what the box office was for it at the time, but if I remember, I think you, at least, if not one or two other people, like, independent of yourself, saw the first one either. I don't know, did you see it in theaters or did you catch it?
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys, I think, saw it in theaters, and then someone else eventually saw it on DVD after its release, and, you know, everyone was raving about it. They said, this is really cool. It's very different. You got to check this out. And so I don't know what the initial box office for the first movie was, but again, like, February or some of those off months might be a nice sweet spot for some of these movies. So, you know, it might also, like I said, still be suffering from that really, really, like, not historic, but really low summer box office numbers and August and September box office numbers from this year, it just might still be feeling some of the effects of that. But I'd say it's by no means reflective of the quality of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just a lot of people, well, maybe I'm giving it more credit than it's worth, but I feel like there's a lot of people that wait for reviews and look for, that coveted Rotten Tomatoes score that everyone seems to go for or talk about. Of course, I don't know what this is. I didn't even look to see what it's rated on Rotten Tomatoes, but, if that has some sort of effect, if people are giving it that type of mixed reviews, if that's going to affect, word of mouth, and because I think the first Kingsman benefited a lot from word of mouth, like you were saying. I think
Agreed.
People saw it, so it surprised them. I think it held around in theaters long enough to get probably a little bit of money anyway, I would think, from word of mouth. And then the home video release, I think, definitely helped it too. Because people that didn't catch it in theaters were still hearing good things about it when it came out on video, and people caught it again.
Yeah, definitely.
So that generated a lot of groundswell for this one. And, most people, even movies that we review or talk about when we go through our top 10 of the year, the movies that we're looking forward to the most are the ones that typically let us down. And if people start looking forward to this movie after watching the first one and they don't come out feeling the same way, then this movie's a miss for them.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I can already say, it just so happens that this was the last of my 10.
I did see that, yeah.
To see. Most of mine were front loaded in the first 2, 3, 4 months of the year. There were 1 or 2 maybe in May and June, but then, I was pretty much waiting until September to cross the last one off the list. I mean, I can already say that out of my top 10 anticipated, maybe at the most 4 of them are going to make my favorite movies of the year. That doesn't mean I don't like them. That doesn't mean I don't regret. There's a big difference between what am I excited to watch and what ultimately is going to be my favorites, or what do I feel are better than others.
Right.
So there's a good chance like this, if this makes my list, it might perhaps be down the lower end. It might be like number 9 or 10 favorites of the year. But again, that's not really indicative of like a letdown by it. I mean, any sequel has heavy lifting to do.
Right. I don't want to get into spoilers for your your favorites list, so we might have to talk after the show. But I feel like I can name your 4. Looking at your list from most anticipated, what I think I could pick for you. We'll see if I'm right later.
Okay.
All right. So anything? Do we just want to talk maybe like specifics, what we liked, and then go into like what we didn't like, and sort of spin from there?
Yeah. Go ahead. Throw out whatever you want.
All right. Stuff that I liked. The first thing that pops into my head is fucking Elton John.
Yeah.
He was just completely outrageous, and I loved him flipping out at everybody. I fucking loved it.
I felt there was like, if they could have pulled it back maybe like 10%, because it like
no way, it was great,
just a little
totally
bit,
great.
Just like one or two little, not even like full sequence outbursts, but just like 1 or 2 little bits. I think my favorite one was when Julianne Moore is like, she's pirated the radio waves and she's giving her presentation to the president and
Yes.
going through the stages of what the disease does. And he's in that last cell when the light turns on and he's just MFing her off and yelling at the guy to get out of his like cell room and everything.
And the guy in the room looks visibly like rattled. Like he's like, I don't know what to do. How do I control Elton John?
Yeah.
That was great. And then like when they're like smashing the robot dog with the bowling balls, and every time Colin Firth wings around, Elton John's giving the figure, "Fuck you, Poppy! Fuck you!"
And then he saves her because like I thought it was funny at the first time that you have that moment where the dogs are in like the dogs encounter him.
Oh, right.
And they're like, Elton John, friend,
Yeah.
identified, and then they kind of call that back later, and it pays off in the bowling alley.
Yeah. Because I remember reading, and I can't remember, we might have talked about it on the show or not, but that they added Elton John to the cast, and I was thinking, oh, he's a perfect fit for Kingsman.
Yeah.
He would make a great agent.
Okay.
He was not an agent. He was just himself.
Which probably, I mean, for the way that they used him, made it much better.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if they were going to go like he's an agent route, he would have probably like a much more reduced role, reduced screen time. He would have been like Michael Gambon was at the beginning of the movie. Like you got him
the guy, the seat at the table type of thing.
Yeah, Arthur.
Yeah.
Right. So he takes over one of the like long-standing legacy leadership roles or something. He's like one of those guys that you kind of get a pop in here and there, but you don't really get much of a payoff for him appearing there. And oh wow, is there a payoff?
Yeah, he would. Oh man, yeah, everything with him is all the scenes with Elton John are the scenes that I feel like I remember most out of this movie. I don't know why they all seem to stick out with me. Sorry.
I enjoyed Whiskey, or I at least enjoyed the action sequences that they built around him.
The one in the snow I thought was really fucking cool.
And I thought it was, you mean like when he runs out of the cabin and kills all the guys?
Yeah.
and I thought that was hilarious because they just kept showing this juxtaposition of Eggsy and Colin Firth sitting in there arguing, and you just see him kind of at first like in the background or from the side view of the cabin, just one by one on his own, killing like 10 agents of the enemy.
Yeah. Even the bar sequence too. I really like the bar sequence. Okay, it was reminiscent of the first movie.
Yes, so that was the one that I was kind of alluding to in the general overview, where it was like one of those sequences that it basically was a complete 100% callback / carbon copy to the first movie, but you obviously get this little spin on it where it's now this brand new character doing it, and you kind of see how he would handle himself. How did you feel about them doing it that way? Because I mean, they set it up the exact same way. Like Colin Firth goes to the door, he locks it, he tries to reinvent himself. He's not quite ready, so this other person has to step up. Did you feel it was pandering a little bit because that was such a cool sequence in the first movie, or did you appreciate it because it was different with this other guy, so you got to see his skill set?
I guess a little more to that I thought it was a cool thing, that I enjoyed it. I think it was the first part of it with Colin Firth is meant to be the joke.
Okay.
Because you're expecting him to do pick up exactly where he left off in the first one. And that's why they set it up the same way, because when he throws that bottle with the umbrella, or the glass with the umbrella, you're like, oh, here we go.
Yep.
And every beat that he did in the first movie that made him look like a badass, he fails at in this sequence in this movie.
True.
So that's where the joke is. So I was cool with that. And then you have to have, I guess at that point, someone step up and take care of these assholes that are in the bar. And doing it with the Statesman guy, with, the bullwhip and everything, like all that. And, it was one of the better fight sequences, I think, in the movie. So yeah, I enjoyed most of that, all of that.
Okay. I thought the end sequence fight between himself and Eggsy and Galahad was pretty cool as well. I mean, to kind of have like a 3-way fight going there with, an electrified lasso that could cut you up like the Resident Evil force field fence thing.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty sweet.
See, I think I had more problems with that fight just because of the camera work.
Okay.
In the obviously computer assisted parts of that fight sequence. Like the bar fight, they might have had computer effects in there, but it's a lot less it doesn't stand out as much to me in that sequence. The whole 3-way fight at the end in the diner, half of that looks completely fake to me.
That's true. Like the actual like human characters themselves look very much. Yeah, you can absolutely tell where it's all rendered.
And part of it, like, there's a lot going on in that fight, and I think the movement of the camera, like, I guess it's staged well enough. It's just I think the movement of the camera, you still kind of lose some of the stuff there, and it feels a little bit disorienting. And I don't know if that's just because it's on a big screen. Like maybe it'll play better on a home TV screen, like when you watch it at home.
Okay.
But I'm just thinking specifically, like when they follow Whiskey, when they throw him against the counter and he rolls over backwards and the camera rolls with him, so you're basically doing a somersault with him.
Oh, yeah.
That's disorienting to me in the theater when I'm looking at shit like that.
Okay.
If the camera does too much movement, I'm starting to lose it and be like, okay, this is just like my head hurts. There's too much going on. it's not as bad as the shaky cam stuff to me. That still is my absolute pet peeve. But for me, in fight sequences, I'd rather have a steady camera shot or wide angle shots to be able to fit all of this stuff in there and coherently and be able to tell what's going on. A lot of camera movements, to me, my personal opinion, it just gets me disoriented.
So what was your reaction as it was happening to the ski lift as it was spinning round and round as it was descending? Did it have the same disorienting feeling to you?
No, because the camera itself is pretty steady during that sequence. Like
okay.
The ski lift itself is spinning.
Yeah.
But the camera's stationary and you're in there with it spin. Like the camera's not spinning. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like there's more like establishing type shots. You're not like zooming in and out of the ski lift. You're not going like spinning around it as it's spinning. It's just you're seeing wide shots of it outside. You're seeing inside, and the camera's steady on the whiskey and Eggsy in there. So no, I didn't think that was as bad. I'm sure, and like there's a few shots even in the opening sequence when Charlie and Eggsy are in the cab fighting. Like a very enclosed space, and the camera's constantly moving around them and through them to different angles and shots.
That beginning sequence?
Right.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that I find a little bit disorienting.
Okay.
But again, that's sort of just personal preference, I guess, for me. There's nothing wrong with the fight scene itself. I think, the choreography and the fights are cool. I just kind of lose it a little bit with all the camera movements.
What did you think of Julianne Moore as a villain character, and specifically like the type that she brought? Like,
as in like the Martha Stewart type?
Almost, yeah. Like the very calm, but like calm and collect, but murderous and like devoid of conscience.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was okay with like it seemed a little bit far like verging on parody.
Okay.
But it still kind of fit, I feel like, for the world they create in these movies.
Yeah, I mean, when I thought about it afterward, I'm like, is that really all that different than like the plan that Samuel L. Jackson had in the first one?
Although, come to think of it, I don't really know what her objective was. Because someone even makes the comment, like, a drug dealer that poisons their own drug supply, what's the play there? Just to demand money for an antidote? Is that it?
Well, she wasn't demanding money for the antidote. Her ransom was the legalization of all substances across the board in the United States.
That's right. Okay.
And maybe
see, that's all lost to me.
Oh, see that.
Now that you mention it, I remember that. But yeah, like in the course of the movie, like by the end of that movie, I don't remember anything that she's trying to do.
Because it was just a means to an end. It wasn't a threat that she would continue poisoning people by any means. But if the United States explicitly puts a ban on making any substance illegal, then everything's legal. And so if she, like she said, she was sick of having this ultra successful, if you will, industry leading drug operation, but she has no public exposure. She has no notoriety. Nobody's giving her accolades for being such a savvy, leader and businesswoman. But if that's a acceptable product, and she can just put it on the shelves, and like she says even in her video, like, make it legal, regulate it, tax it, do whatever you want. But you can't ban it.
So she just wants the recognition of like, hey, I made a successful business.
Well, and if as successful as she's saying she's been, she would continue getting filthy frickin' rich.
Right.
Because of the type of operation she's been able to create. I don't know.
Maybe there's just like, maybe I'm forgetting it just because I feel like there's a lot of like different subplots and different bits of story going on that I feel like her storyline and motivations are overshadowed, I think, by a lot of other stuff that's going on and becomes mostly forgettable to me by the end of the movie. That, again, I don't remember half the shit, what she's trying to accomplish, other than, like, they have to stop her.
Okay, I can agree with that. I mean, yeah, as the story goes on, you have the... Well, I guess we can digress and bring this up. So, did you... How okay or not were you with the justification given for Colin Firth's character still being alive?
Now, I think, first off the bat, I wish they would have put that shit in the trailers. If they would have kept him a secret in the movie, I would have probably appreciated it so much more.
Me too.
Granted, we had to figure they were going to try to retcon some stuff and somehow make this work that he still lived. In the course of the movie, and again, the universe that they've created with these crazy gadgets and, like, weird kind of stuff that they can pull off, and I bought it. As explanations go, I didn't think it was terrible.
Agreed, same.
I could have done without the amnesia thing, but in the sense, like, if you're going to get shot in the head, I feel like they have to give you something. You can't just fully recover from that.
Right.
So, as much as I feel like the amnesia part was just wasted story time, I feel like they had to do it, if that makes sense.
Agreed. I think it also, if they were going to go about it the way that they did, it actually maybe gave a little bit more credence to the fact that, yeah, they can kind of save someone who's been shot point blank in the face and in the head, but it's not just seamless. There's side effects.
Right.
It takes time. It takes, it might not happen at all. If they had just gone with, like, oh yeah, we have this kind of cool thing, and yeah, it took a little bit of, like, rehab, but he was back up in a couple of weeks.
Right.
Would that have seemed worse than what they went with? And as you said, they used a good amount of screen time on the amnesia and the let's bring Galahad back to himself and let's figure him out. Yeah, but it might have been a necessary journey to take given the potential alternatives they could have offered.
Right. Because otherwise you have a way to essentially cure death.
Yes.
Like, if you can just bring people back from a headshot without any side effects, that's, the cure-all for that.
Yeah.
And then, two, if they brought him back without some sort of amnesia, and it's been, like, what, a year? Did they establish a time frame since the first one? A year-ish?
So I was just thinking that. I think at some point, doesn't Halle Berry's character say that they've had him about a year?
Yeah, I feel like a year sounds right to me.
Same.
So either way, so if they brought him back and saved him from the headshot, and he remembered who he was, then it begs the question of, like, well, why didn't Harry come back to the Kingsman if he knows exactly who he is?
Right.
And then if, like, you just have him randomly show up somewhere, and then he has to go through a bunch of exposition to explain what happened to him anyway. Again, all things considered, this may have been the best way for them to play it if they wanted to bring Colin Firth back.
Right.
So, and I do like Colin Firth. I was sad to see him go in the first one.
Yeah.
Or, quote unquote go. But at the same time, part of this movie, if when you kill someone off in one movie and then bring them back in the next, you lose your stakes.
Yes.
Like, there's not a lot of stakes there in the movies anymore. So it didn't seem like they had to kill somebody else just because it's like, look, deaths are permanent now.
Yeah, and I think they had to pick somebody else, because why spend so much of the movie dealing with the return of Colin Firth and the reinstatement of his persona, only to have him die again at the end somehow? Right. That would have just been pointless and redundant.
Yeah.
So yeah, unfortunately to be fair, before we lost Mark Strong, we lost everybody.
Yeah, which I was really hoping watching the trailers, because you get one glimpse of Roxy in the trailer.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, maybe she's got, like, maybe they're just hiding what she needs to do in this movie to keep it under wraps. Nope, that's pretty much all you get from her. She had no purpose in this movie whatsoever. And they effectively kill her off screen, which really kind of pissed me off.
Yeah, I mean, I had mixed feelings of it, because at first I didn't think, like, if it had just been her that got taken out, it'd been one thing. But, like, for the first 10 minutes after like those targets get hit one after one after one after one, I just keep thinking like, oh, okay, eventually we'll figure out how Roxy escaped and she'll show back up. And then, I think that was their way of establishing the stakes. That, yeah, Colin Firth's, and to be fair, it wasn't like the Kingsmen rescued Colin Firth and were able to, be his miracle savior. It's this other organization.
Right.
Whereas the Kingsmen are all destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot wrong, I think, with that sequence to me. One, again, because I think there's no point in killing Roxy. They don't even really show you that she's dead. Like, Eggsy just says 3 or 4 times, they killed Roxy, and that's the best we get, which isn't good enough for me, for someone that had that much screen time and was a character in the first movie. She deserves more than that if they're gonna kill her.
I'll give you that, though. I think it's like the total destruction of that mansion that you're shown. I think it's really left to be very clear that there's no way she made it out.
And that's another stickler for me, is that, okay, I can understand targeting people's private residence and hitting them with a missile. There's nothing there. But the frickin' Kingsman headquarters, for all the fucking gadgets they have, you tell me they don't have some sort of missile defense system that's going to stop incoming attacks like that?
Or at least give you a better heads up. Yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah, I of all the places that got hit, that mansion, I think, should have been spared by some sort of sweet technology that, again, would have saved Roxy and kept her alive to do something.
What I wasn't clear about was, just like all the other places, it seemed like the building got hit by a missile, right? By like a projectile.
The mansion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe my thermodynamics and missile science knowledge isn't up to date, but would that have caused such a collapse in like the ground around it?
Well, I think it was like almost like a bunker buster type missile. Like, I think the missile went into the ground in front of the mansion where like their fountain was, and then exploded.
Okay.
So basically making a vacant hole underneath the mansion, which then collapsed the ground above, and it caved in.
Okay. Maybe I'd have to see the sequence again for that to stand out better to me. But yeah, of all the other places, they're like, oh, look, Eggsy's house blew up.
Yeah, I think those had direct impacts with a missile.
Yeah,
the mansion wasn't
the suit
that.
shop blew up, but the mansion was like, oh, look, a crater just dissolved under the house like a big giant sinkhole, and it all went away.
Yeah, honestly, that shot might even be in the trailer, so you might even be able to just watch the trailer and find it. And
yeah, that's
see
true.
what the missile does.
Yeah.
I mean, part of me, even though, again, that they've established, or at least they tell us that Roxy's dead, I would not be surprised if they bring her back some way, somehow, for the third one.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I guess in a way, like, they came up with a way to do it for Colin Firth, but do you think there would be much of a reason to? Other than, like, fan favorite?
If she came back, I feel like she'd be a villain. I feel like if you're gonna bring her back in the next one after a shit-ass death like that, they have to come back a villain.
I mean, maybe I could see it that way. I don't know if they could make her, like, the main villain, but it might be she's, like, a supporting antagonist.
Then again, I guess to your point, like, it might feel like a little bit more rehash at this point, since we had Charlie and this one is, like, the right-hand guy.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just feel like she deserves more than what she got in this movie. It's just it's a shit way to go out.
It reminded me in some ways, there's 2 examples of when something like this happens that I always go to. The first one is Alien 2 and Alien 3. So if you've ever seen Aliens and then you watch Alien 3, Alien 2 is all about Sigourney Weaver as Ripley eventually locating this small girl on the ship that she's on, keeping her alive.
Is that Newt, right?
Newt, yeah. For the rest of the movie, which then ends with them both in safety going into, like, hypersleep. There's no tease at the end of that movie. No, like, last frame scare of, like, oh, look, there's an alien hand that came around the door or lurking in this room somewhere buried deep in the ship. There's nothing. It just ends with them in safety. And then at the beginning of Alien 3, there's like this offhanded comment about how she was like Shakespeareanly killed off screen. Like in between the movies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what the frick? Like, that was the biggest cop out in the world. Like, exactly. Like, you had this whole importance built around her and very integral involvement. And then, well, we don't really want to do anything with that anymore. So we'll just say that she died.
Right.
That's example one. Example two, and maybe this is more akin to what we just watched, was the Bourne Identity.
Oh, okay.
And then the beginning of the Bourne Supremacy.
Yeah.
His chick lady
Marie
is killed in like the first like 7 minutes of Supremacy, again as like this cornerstone character that you follow all through the first one.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just like why even have them in the movie at all? Why is it some kind of behind the scenes thing that they didn't know what to do with the characters? So they just write her off.
Well,
and they didn't want her like showing back up later, so they just had to definitively like try to kill her, so she wasn't. Because I understand like this movie revolves around Eggsy and Harry and their relationship to rekindle their relationship and bring Harry back to the fold, and Eggsy's still looking for that father figure and stuff like that. Like, I get all that. It's just that why even put her in the movie at all if she's gonna do nothing and then get killed off screen?
Yeah, I if they were gonna do it, I feel like before that happened, they should have given her like something pivotal to do that maybe it would have even seemed insignificant at the time, but then it would come back around to become useful later.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, maybe they were caught between a rock and a hard place where they're like, we know we don't need to advance the narrative of this character. We don't want to take the cop out and just ignore her, not put the character in the movie and just act like she's not around anymore. But, as a plot point, they also needed to address the fact that Julianne Moore's character figured out and planned and killed all the agents. So, she can't just not be there to begin with. As I said, if once you decide that you don't need to move forward or you don't want to move forward, I guess it's a rock and a hard place. Damned if you do, damned if you don't on how you handle it.
Well, I mean, you start thinking too, like there's two female agents in this movie, and both of them are basically relegated to IT. Yeah. All Roxy did was be on the computer and give Eggsy information at a dinner, and all Halle Berry did was sit in front of the computer with Merlin and do stuff.
Yeah. That's true.
I don't know. I guess I just kind of expected more and wanted more. I mean, I guess, again, maybe the third one will get more out of Halle Berry since she's been promoted.
I'm hoping. Do you think they'll continue sort of this, I wouldn't call it a trend yet. It's only the second movie, the first time they've done it, but do you think we'll get introduced to like yet another agency from like maybe another country in the third one, or they'll just kind of go on an expedition with like the Statesman and the Kingsman now?
I mean, I think you run the risk of having too many characters if you do a third agency. And the way they set this one up at the end, establishing that, again, basically the Kingsmen are wiped out. The only people that are left are Harry and Eggsy. And now that Statesman more or less is part of Kingsman now, or vice versa, whatever.
Yeah.
It seems like they're one agency now between the two, the U.S. Version of it and the London version.
Okay.
So I see that as that's just one group. So I see the sequel is doing just all the same characters we've seen, just doing other things together.
Okay.
Because I was actually kind of hoping, when the climax sort of happens with the movie, I was hoping Halle Berry would just kind of show up and like help them. Like, look, I'm capable because I set this up earlier of being, wanting to be an agent, but I keep getting turned down. Well, here's how I prove myself, being an agent, and then that still didn't happen.
That's a good point. Although, in her role at the time, since Merlin was out of the picture, like maybe you kind of needed at least one person helming that control room role.
True.
But
yeah, I mean, arguments can be made on both sides, I guess.
Yeah, I take your point.
Where I think I feel like we started this discussion with stuff we liked. So is there anything else that we liked that we want to talk about?
I will actually. I'll give some props to Taron Egerton. I do think he carried the character well. I believed his arc through this chapter of it. It didn't seem forced. He seems very comfortable in that character, very natural. You know what he reminds me of? He reminds me of how natural Chris Pine felt in the first Star Trek. As
God
damn it,
Kirk,
thank you. I was like, Shatner. No, Shatner's a person. Shatner's not a fictional character. It just felt like he's very comfortable in those shoes, and he very easily transforms from I'm an actor into here's Eggsy, and you believe you're watching Eggsy the whole time, not an actor play a role.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised, I guess, how emotional I got with some of the scenes with him.
Okay.
And it's like, it's small stuff. There's a scene in the beginning when I forget, it was before his dinner with his girlfriend's parents. He's leaving to go to the office in the morning. She sets up like the breakfast thing. She's like, oh, we're going to practice.
Yeah.
He flashes back to him and Harry going over the cutlery and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you see him visibly, like his lip starts to quiver and shake when he starts thinking of Harry, and then he has to turn around and talk to the dog and then come back, and he's visibly shaken, but he's trying to hold it under control. Little things like that, like I appreciate that. Like that hit me for some reason. Yeah.
And again, he pulls it off very naturally where it doesn't seem forced.
Right,
because moments like that are... very much a trope at this point where, I'm reminded of something that's calling back a powerful memory of association and it is impacting me. Look how it is impacting me. I am torn up, possibly distraught. But it is he found the right balance in those moments.
Yeah, it's very subtle. Like you can tell he gets choked up a little bit. His voice cracks, I think, a little bit even too when he's trying to talk.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like barely keeping it together, and I don't know. That specifically, that scene stands out to me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I did sort of enjoy. I like that they brought back the princess, and like her and Eggsy are together now.
Yeah, so that was one of the other things that Sarah and I said, like, oh man, we really should have watched the first one again. Because we're like, until they like named her, he called her princess, or they went to be like dinner with her parents.
Yeah.
Like the whole time, like, is that the chick from the end of the first one or not? I don't know. Because she's not like an actress that I recognize readily. Like these two movies are the only things I've ever seen her in.
I will say that, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but when he first comes home after being in the sewer and smells like shit and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And you see his girlfriend from behind in the mirror. Like, you don't see her face. You just see her long hair from behind.
Okay.
For a second, I thought it was Roxy. Like, him and Roxy were together now. And it wasn't until, like, she turned around and you saw her face, I was like, oh, no, that's not her. That's the princess lady.
Oh, okay.
So... I mean, I guess it makes sense in the course of the movie, like, the way the first one ended and the way this one starts, that they would be together and that could work. But I would not have been sad if him and Roxy were together. Really, like, I'm really championing Roxy here. Like, she needs to, she needs to have something to do. Granted, I don't know what she would have done if she was just sort of relegated to, like, Eggsy's girlfriend, but since the both of them are Kingsmen, I feel like she would have been on, like, equal footing with him. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also... would have it would not have disappointed anybody if the strange anal joke at the end of the first movie was just like this self-contained thing that happened and there was no continuing narrative with those characters.
It's the James Bond thing. James Bond always sleeps with a woman at the end of the movie, and then you go on to the next movie and he's with somebody else.
Exactly. So I mean, they could have gone that way, and actually if they had, then getting into his and Roxy's relationship just a little bit, and then if Roxy gets taken out, then it's much more impactful.
Right.
Yeah, they could have gone that route, but I don't know, maybe then they thought they wouldn't have all these other, subplot points to draw from to move the overall story forward, and I don't know.
And I mean,
they had options.
I don't know if we want to touch on this now, but
Good.
I was thinking like to suggest the question of like, what do we think or prediction wise could happen for the next one?
Mm-hmm.
Like some of the storylines this thing sets up.
Hmm.
And I think the way Eggsy keeps talking about, like, I don't know how he would work as a prince, especially given his line of work, which I think is an interesting thing to set up for a potential sequel. But at the same time, I don't know if they could play with that as much. Like, I feel like they'd set that up to be like, oh, this is going to be a problem. And then I feel like either they're going to stick with it and try to, have him try to lead this double life type thing, which is, it's hit or miss depending on the movie and how it's handled. The other option I see is that they kill the wife. Like, the princess is going to be killed and then Eggsy's out for, like, a revenge mission.
Yeah, it could be. I
don't feel like it at the time, like, as much as they play sort of like happy life type of thing in this one, I don't feel like the spy genre ever really has like happy endings.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way they could go with it would be that the way that he's able to carry on is sort of like hiding right out there in the open.
Okay.
He is the married prince, into the family of, a royal family. So who in the world would ever expect or be looking for him to be, a world-class spy and assassin?
But are they going to go like the Superman route and like, oh, he puts on glasses, so now I don't know who he is? Like, if he's that public of a figure and he's out in public doing spy things, it's not like, I don't feel like it's too hard for people to be like, oh, that's the prince.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess it'd have to be a lot more covert. But I mean, up until...
Because the beginning of this movie sets up like they do not do stuff in public. He can't fire missiles from a taxi cab in the middle of downtown.
Yeah, that's true. Because even if like in this movie, like if someone like Charlie becomes disenchanted and they're pissed and they're out for revenge, like there are people who know certain people's identities as Kingsman.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Again, it's something they might find a creative way to do it. I can't think of how they could do it at this time. So I feel like the only other alternative is to scrap that idea. And the only way to scrap that idea in my mind is to get rid of the thing that's making him a prince, which is the wife. So I don't know. That's just sort of my thoughts for the next one if they decide to go that route. Any other stuff that you liked you want to touch on? Otherwise, maybe we'll just spin to stuff we didn't like and see where that leads us.
I mean, like, for some reason, like, specifics aren't necessarily standing out. I think a movie like this, the reason I like it is the sum of its parts, not necessarily maybe as much individual elements.
Okay.
And that's why I really dug about the first one. And probably, I mean, once, if a third one is announced, whenever we get an official release date and we get to the point where we're doing like anticipated movies for that year, there's a good chance, Kingsman 3 for me will end up on that list still. And even if we transition to, criticisms of the movie or just low points for us, I don't know if I have all that much that we haven't kind of hit on already. Was there anything else for you that really didn't hit the mark?
Nothing. I think most of the stuff I talked about, the Roxy thing bugged me. I have the note for that. The missile defense system bugged me. We talked about that. Some of the camera work we talked about. I guess one of the criticisms I keep hearing people level at this movie is that it's too long. Like it's like what 2 hours 20 minutes, something like that. So, which got me thinking, like, what in this movie feels unnecessary and that it could be cut? And I feel like most of the sequences with Eggsy and his friends can be cut. I don't think they brought anything to the movie other than his friend that. I mean, I guess that birthday party, the quick little birthday party thing at the beginning sets up his friend to die when the missile attack happens. But you see quick flashes of his friends later on in the movie, I guess it's just to establish, like, hey, look, there's people we sort of know may die from this thing. But I don't feel like they had a part in there at all, that they didn't need to be there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it could have trimmed down a little bit, but I don't know.
I think the most time-consuming thing for me that felt unnecessary was Whiskey's turn.
Yes. I will give you that. It felt like they could have... Not that it was forced, but honestly, I feel like it came out of nowhere.
Yeah, because they had to go through... they had to go through their exposition point that was like, oh, this is exactly why he's doing what he's doing. And I was completely... It almost felt like the ending had like 2 or 3 endings. Like, I was completely ready for them to overdose Poppy.
Yep.
Get the code, save the day, and be done. But then it's like, nope, we just need a big extended fight sequence after the big extended fight sequence we just had. So let's throw Whiskey in the mix. But at the same time, like, him being shot in the head and the whole, like, after getting the antidote and Harry shooting him, that whole sequence serves a purpose because you're not sure if Harry's just crazy. Like, he's not fully recovered, so that has a purpose.
Right.
But at that point, like, I don't know if he needed to come back. Like, I feel like you could have just left Whiskey dead and just left that question sort of hanging there if Harry is crazy or not.
Okay.
Of course, I don't know how you solve that if Whiskey doesn't come back and confirm, yes, I'm trying to stop this.
Yeah, what I thought was strange that they could have maybe done better is intertwine the reveal, because like they overdose Poppy and they're pretty much ready to end. And then you have like this, Lord of the Rings ending where nope, we got another ending.
Yeah.
Where they could have intertwined the reveal of his double cross, his ulterior motives. They could have intertwined that with the resolution of Poppy better, rather than just having it, here's the resolution of Poppy, and now we're going to move on to the resolution of Whiskey.
Right. Or even, like, granted, it seemed like he was out, like, for himself, but if you're going to have him turn, just have him be a mole. I think that would fit and sort of flesh out Poppy more, instead of having, like, another subplot that we're trying to figure out and connect to. It just seems a little bit convoluted.
Yeah, it does. Like at some point, yeah, if they needed to deal with him for the same motivations that he had, that could have happened before they get to Poppy.
Yeah.
Or like I said, intertwine it with that sequence with her. So either they're dealt with simultaneously, or Whiskey's, interference is dealt with, and then you just wrap things up with her basically in the same way that they did. But yeah, it felt like the movie was about to almost be over. Like, okay, we're done. And then like, oh yeah, that thing that we were setting up, now it's going to pay off.
Yeah, I feel like if they brought him back at the end, at least just in my mind, I'm trying to piece it together. You have Charlie face off against Eggsy, and as Colin Firth is moving on Poppy, it's revealed that Whiskey is the mole. Mm-hmm. And then Colin Firth has to fight Whiskey. I think that would be the way to do it. And then after the whole fight sequence between the 4 of them is over, 2-on-2, whichever they try to do, that's when you get the overdose from Poppy, and it sort of ends a little bit more mellow, I guess.
Okay. Instead of on like an adrenaline kick.
Right. Like, I don't know if they just felt like they just had to keep upping their game as they go through the movie.
Maybe.
We talked a lot about other stuff, but I don't know if we really dove into what we thought about the Statesmen and their organization.
Not yet.
So let's go there. What did you think of the addition of the Statesmen?
While I thought it was fun to have this like parallel organization brought in, overall, like other than giving you a reason for Whiskey to exist and be involved with the 2 of them, with Eggsy and Galahad.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the rest of the organization overall played just about as much importance as, Channing Tatum in and of himself. Like, Jeff Bridges really didn't, like, he's the stand-in for the head of an organization because they kill Michael Gambon at the beginning of the movie. Yeah. So you don't have one of those for the Kingsmen, so you need one of them from somewhere. So that's the role he's fulfilling. And yeah, you're given Halle Berry as this parallel to Merlin. And, now that, we didn't really even get there yet, but, Merlin gets killed, everybody, unfortunately, but,
spoiler.
Yeah. But, I was okay with that wrap up. I liked how they handled that. But, then you're introduced to this contemporary of his, which really, like, you're wrapping up Merlin's story, but really what you're doing is continuing it through the role of Halle Berry.
Yeah.
So I guess I feel like I think it was fun, and it was a fun element to have there, but really, like, other than giving us Whiskey to be the other guy on the team to go on the mission with, the organization itself didn't really, like, it wasn't really all that important. It didn't seem central. Like you said, like, you're following Eggsy and Galahad. They're the reason you're watching.
Yeah, I guess it's more of just sort of like a plot point. Like, they need funds and resources somehow. They can't do all this on their own, so let's just make another organization for them to go to. But I liked the sort of reveal on how these doomsday safes for each organization that points to the other. I thought that was a cool little thing.
Definitely.
And yeah, I guess I just sort of, you always wonder what kind of, in this world, what other type of spy organizations could there be, since we're based in, the UK. What would the American one be like? And, it plays to a lot of American stereotypes, and, the America's the greatest thing in the world. Like, even the people in the bar.
Yeah.
Like, the assholes in the bar, I was like, yep, that definitely seems like Southern people to me. Southern stereotypes. So, yeah, I that was all kind of fun to me. I liked how they set all that up, and the organization I thought was a good counterpoint to what the, they talk about how the people that formed the organization went in the whiskey business and stuff like that, and the other guys were the tailors.
Yeah.
So I thought that was fun.
Which I think maybe that's one of the only, not the only, but a strong reason why I wouldn't mind having a third organization introduced to some degree in another sequel, is to kind of see, like, what kind of cover culture have they developed? What public persona are they hiding behind?
Well, then the question remains, what third organization would you like to see? Where would they be based out of?
Maybe just because it would be the most quaint and funny to watch. You got to go Canadian, right?
Just a bunch of people on Mounties.
Yeah, either that, or it would be like people who, like, own a hockey team, or like a maple syrup farm.
I like the hockey team idea. I think that would actually work pretty well.
I think that would be fun. I think,
and they'll be the nicest organization ever,
right? Like, I don't care. Like, somehow, like, you could get Seth Rogen in that movie.
They should just hire a lot of, like, actual Canadians.
Oh yeah,
Nathan Fillion is the only one that comes to mind off the bat.
And then just, like, yeah, like, they could have just, like, a bunch, like, a gross amount of Canadian cameos come through. Like, they're like, they just have random jobs at that organization's office. Like, you go through and, like, oh look, there's Michael J. Fox and Jim Carrey. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, you're winning me over on this idea. Now I want to see this. I'm going to be disappointed if it's not in the next one.
Well, because if you think about it, like, if they did at least another English-speaking country, like Ireland or Australia, I feel like it would maybe get too stereotypical. Like,
okay,
as easy as it is to go to, like, Kentucky in America, where the cowboys are with their whiskey, there's a lot of different American tropes that you could go to that American audience would recognize and identify with. If you're showing this to a predominantly English-speaking market, in Great Britain and in America, etc., and you go to somewhere like Ireland or Australia, I hate to say it, Americans don't, and I'm one of them to some extent in this regard, we don't really know a lot about other places. So,
yeah,
other than really, really stereotypical stuff in some of those other countries, it would get really simple, I think, to the point of over parody. Whereas Canada, you could still keep it comical but quaint enough that we could, I don't know, it wouldn't seem as cartoony.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see it going there. I mean, if they went really out of the box and went to like Japan, Russia, somewhere in like the Eastern Bloc of Europe, I mean, really surprise me. Like, hey, sure, go for it.
I'd actually like to see them, because this one and the first movie basically were like world-ending events just by like random, some random villain somewhere.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind to see them go against a rival spy organization.
Ooh, I like it.
I think that would. I mean, I guess you could still do your like world-ending subplot, or plot of the movie or something like that. But there has to be a rival organization to these spy organizations. I just don't know where they'd be or what they'd be trying to do. That's something for the writers to figure out. But I'll plant that little nugget for you people. You just give me a good story out of that.
Yeah, we're story. We get the story credits on the movies, not the screenplay.
Yeah. We crack with the whiteboard. We bring out the right whiteboard, start writing down ideas. It's your job to make it work.
Exactly.
You did kind of touch on Merlin's death. Do we want to dive into that at all? Because I thought that was handled like a lot better. Again, than the only other death I can compare it to is Roxy's.
Yeah.
Obviously, Merlin got some screen time and some time to develop, and that was a little bit more impactful. I did like that. And I didn't really recognize it until maybe like after the movie, but he keeps bringing up John Denver, in Country Road, and that song is like worked into the score of the movie.
Yes,
which I didn't realize why until, of course, the end of the movie. But
yes,
I appreciated that.
I thought it was well. I mean, to some degree, I kind of saw it coming, but even then, like I think there was something about the fact that they actually drew that scene out a little bit that made it work.
Which scene? The actual death scene?
The actual death, yeah. Like from the moment where he takes over and has to hold that landmine.
Yeah.
If it had just been like 20 seconds of, no, you go, and, I'll be able to create a distraction for you. And there goes Merlin, nobly sacrificing himself. The fact that it kept going and he like hacks the bushes out of his way, and the soldiers slowly approach him, and he headbutts one of them and knocks them out, and the others take their time and approach, and he starts to sing, and like it actually worked better.
I like that scene. One of the thoughts that occurred to me during that scene was like he visibly looks over to his left and right and nods to someone.
Yeah,
and the guards aren't like, who are you talking
to? Nope. And he does it more than once.
Yeah, I know.
Like, they keep cutting back. He does it like 3 or 4 times.
Like, I get that. It works for the audience. It's your emotional tie to this character and what everyone's seeing and stuff. I get that. For emotional impact, it works.
Yep. For
the logic sense of, like, what these guards are thinking and what they're seeing, and, like, logically, there's got to be other people in the woods with them. Yeah, that kind of fell flat.
Yeah, but I mean, there's definitely a large degree of suspension of disbelief here that you have to go with.
And that's the thing. Like, I feel like I'm bitching and moaning about a lot of stuff in this movie. I'm with you. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. This is not one I'm trying to skip. This is not one I'm going to avoid. I'm going to own this and look forward to the next one if they do another one. Absolutely.
And actually, I think something we didn't hit on towards the end, that like the way that the fight splits up at the end, where it's, well, for a while, it's like Colin Firth versus the dogs.
Oh, yeah.
But then it's, Eggsy versus Charlie again.
Yeah.
I thought their fight, like their one-on-one fight, was actually really cool.
Yeah, Eggsy and Charlie was good. I kind of feel bad for Colin Firth. All he did was run around and fall down against a computer-animated dog. There wasn't too much there.
No, he did it well.
That's true. True.
He sold me on the idea that it was really happening.
But like, you think of like the church scene with him from the first one, and he gets nothing like that in this movie.
No. And I think they kind of, that's why they maybe tried to make the last fight with the two of them with whiskey a little bit more like over the top and animated and whatnot. Because there's really no scene like that for anybody in the movie.
Yeah.
There's not like because I even if you take that scene out of the first movie, overall I still would have liked the first movie and thought it was really cool. But the addition of that, and it just keeps going on and on and on, and it keeps like changing styles of how the camera's moving, and like it goes from close up to wide and circles around this area and maybe goes like first person to Colin Firth, and then it maybe looks like it's like, strapped, like the camera was like strapped to his chest and you're just like following his face around, and it's like it just kept like that was such a standout scene in that movie that you didn't get anything like that in this one that really blew you away.
Yeah, because
it took you by surprise, if nothing else.
Yeah, and that, like you said, that's the one that stands out of the first one. And I don't think and part of it, I think, even like the song choice there. I think the song choice for that scene in the church in the first one, like everything is hitting on all cylinders for that scene, and it works so well. One, there's no fight scene that I think lives up to that bar that the first one, that that church scene does. And two, there's no songs that stand out to me too much during the course of this movie. The only one that I think that kind of, it was like, oh, okay, I like the use of that there, was the one with Eggsy, Harry, and Whiskey, was the like country remix of Word Up.
Yeah, where it kind of, like, it wasn't the full.
It was like the beat
it kind
of
of kept
the
going
actual
in and out.
song. Yeah, it was like the sample of the song, but like with the redneck country version sang over top of it.
Yeah, and then like
with a little bit of twangy guitar and stuff in there too.
Yeah, but then like it wasn't like the composition, like it was only at certain times it would like apply those extra elements, and then it would kind of pull back and go to like another like slightly altered version of it.
Oddly enough, I was really pissed off that like after this movie, I'm like, I'm gonna get that song. I went to look at the soundtrack, and it's just the instrumental stuff. They don't have like you figure with all the freaking Elton John songs they have in here that they would have a soundtrack with like Elton John on there. But no, so if you really want that song, you can't find it anywhere. And if you do find it, please let me know what it is and where to find it, because I want it.
Well, tweet to 20th Century Fox, and just like I don't think that Marvel thought that people would have enjoyed the music element to Guardians of the Galaxy the first time around. That I don't think they ever had plans initially to release the album as a soundtrack. Like, oh, here's the soundtrack of the movie. Here's all the songs we used. Once they realized, like, hey, exit interviews and fan reaction, like, oh, people really dig this. Quickly, let's put these deals together. Let's release this.
Yeah.
Maybe Fox will do that. Maybe maybe they don't have a full album to put out, but maybe they'll throw up a couple songs on iTunes or something.
I mean, I feel like they're like, even just soundtracks in general, I feel like they're few and far between now for movies. I don't know if there's no interest for them. I mean, the only one that really stands out to me recently is Baby Driver, but Baby Driver was built around that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've said this before, but the idea of the original motion picture soundtrack of like originally composed music, especially just for that movie, nobody cares anymore.
Well, I feel like you're more likely to find, like, again, like you said, the instrumental orchestra versions of soundtracks now than actually soundtracks that have specific songs by an artist that are various artists on there with different songs that were played during the movie. Mm-hmm. All the stuff that you see in the credits that was like, this song was used here, this song was used there. They don't make soundtracks with those songs anymore, it seems like. At least maybe it's the movies I'm looking for that I can't find them, but I don't know. I digress. Anything, I'm trying to see if there's anything else we want to talk about. I don't know if it's something we want to touch on, but I've seen a lot of people complaining about like a gratuitous sex scene in this movie. Which I didn't think was as bad as I think people were making it out to be.
No. Honestly, I mean, I guess like if it wasn't there, like it still could have been much more implied as opposed to even the bit that they do portray. But I don't like I've seen way more unnecessary sequences in movies.
You watched 50 Shades of Grey, didn't you?
I won't say that I didn't. No, I never have. God, no. No, I don't know. I didn't, not that I'm saying I think those people are stupid for thinking that, but I don't agree.
I think maybe it was just like all the headlines were like, that was after the early screenings and like right before opening weekend. That was the headlines I was reading was like,
Seriously?
oh, has this gone too far? So it like got me expecting some weird ass thing. And I was like, there's not even like nudity in it.
No. And honestly, I even said to Sarah that since effectively the anal joke at the end of the first one is like so associated with that movie.
Yeah. Above all the other stuff.
When they get into the plot points during this second one where they're like, oh, this will need to be inserted and not in the nose. That's where I thought they were going again.
Oh, I got you.
Like, I thought that's what they were implying because it was like a callback to that joke. And so it could
I actually think they made a callback to that joke earlier before that.
They do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for what they did, it wasn't like, watch Game of Thrones, watch Outlander, like some of these, like take like True Blood. Like if they thought that was like too much or graphic or so, like, good God, like, no offense, you must be a bit uptight or a bit of a prude. I don't know what else you're watching that this is like shocking to you.
Yeah, I feel like the only reason it's like a big thing is because the camera's like right there.
Yeah, I guess.
But the majority of it, I feel like, is CG. Like, yeah. I don't even know if that hand is real.
I don't know why it would bother somebody who is enjoying these two movies. The things that I would guess are the reason they like them. Why does that bother you so much?
Yeah, I don't know. Like everyone's so desensitized to violence that suddenly sex is like, oh, that's a bad thing. We can't show people sex. We're fine with blowing people's heads off. I guess.
And I don't even know if I'm going there. It's just like, obviously the movie, right, like we said at the beginning, like, it doesn't take itself seriously. It is that, like, you know, Earth 2 version of James Bond where it can be silly and it can be a little vulgar.
We need to put that on the poster. Earth 2 version of James Bond.
You know, like, that's what it is. And like, if you saw the first movie, you know it has that sensibility. And like I said, what they showed wasn't even, yeah, like, I don't, like, if you're okay with all the language and the violence and the, like, over the top exaggerated nature of everything in these movies, like, what about that, for lack of a better, you know, no pun intended, rubbed you the wrong way?
It was a pretty good pun. Yeah, I don't know if I actually read the articles. I was just seeing headlines pop up everywhere, like a couple days before release.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I expected some weird gratuitous thing, but it wasn't that. So I don't know. Again, I don't know if my expectations were just led in a direction from those headlines that I was expecting something else. But yeah, I don't see the big deal. But I don't know. So, you know, people just like to complain about shit anymore. So who the hell knows? I have a couple other quick little bullet points, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on, because I'm sort of wrapping it up, I guess, at this point.
Yep, no worries. Go right
ahead. Quick little question. Favorite gadget in the movie?
Ooh. Well, I feel like this one maybe wasn't as... It didn't introduce a whole lot of new stuff that the first one had that I caught. I do kind of like Whiskey's electrified death lasso thing.
Yeah, that's where I was going to. The retractable whip that can turn electric.
Yeah.
Like something. It's a lightsaber, but it's like a whip.
Yes. Yeah, it's not so much electric as it pretty much is. Because just because you put electricity through something, it doesn't mean it's going to slice a body in half like a laser.
Right. Indiana Jones needs one of those. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, I would totally watch that movie. Like remake Crystal Skull with that as an
just
element.
give him that weapon.
Oh yeah, I'll watch the hell out of that.
All right, so we sort of did talk about like predictions for Kingsman 3 and if we think that'll happen. So we covered that. I do just want to talk because we've talked a little bit about just comparisons between this and James Bond.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, would you rather see another Kingsman movie or another James Bond movie?
With the things that I've heard that would be part of a next Indiana Jones movie, meaning still having to have Steven Spielberg directing and probably
James Bond. Kingsman movie or James
Bond. Sorry. I'm still stuck on Indiana Jones and Crystal Skull.
That whip, you can't leave that whip.
Oh no. Can we give James Bond a whip?
Regular whip.
Okay, he might be able to do so. Well, you know what? Like a Bond secondary villain might be able to do something cool with a whip.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
Okay, maybe that's still a possibility. Well, I guess. Well, maybe my thoughts are along the same lines. I mean, after Spectre, I'm probably more excited to see another Kingsman, or at least I would be. I would care to see that first. If another Bond,
yeah.
I mean, I think I've said this, in previous shows. I did not grow up watching the Bond movies. I've seen the Daniel Craigs and I think 2 of the Pierce Brosnans, and I'm kind of still catching up from the old ones. I watched like the first 3 Sean Connerys. So I don't necessarily have as much of a history with them. I don't have as much of an attachment to them. And, from what I have seen in the last couple chapters, other than Skyfall, where I thought that was just a well-made movie, regardless of it being part of this like long anthology and the multiple chapters and all that. The other Daniel Craig movies, I didn't really see necessarily like wowed me. They didn't like bring something new that I hadn't seen from other franchises, other stories,
right.
other film making. Whereas Kingsman, I would very much say did. So if it's, would I like to see Kingsman 3 before the next James Bond? Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I'm along the same lines. I'm thinking, like, after watching this movie and then watching, like, Spectre, which franchise I'd rather see the next installment of, and it's Kingsman.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think Kingsman has a better chance of doing something fun, interesting, and different. Craig's James Bonds are good. They're hit or miss. He's two out of 4, I think, that are good. Casino Royale and Skyfall are good. Quantum and Spectre, okay. So I don't know what we'll get with the next one he's supposed to be in, but I have more. I'm expecting Kingsman to do more things different and exciting that would hold my attention more, I think, than the next James Bond movie.
Yeah.
But I guess that being said, like, James Bond is a franchise that has lasted for, 20 some movies? I think it's getting to 25.
Yeah, I think
the next one is Bond
25, yeah.
So it's adapted. Like every couple years, it or even sometimes even movie to movie, it just follows trends.
Mm-hmm.
Like Craig's James Bond is adapted from Jason Bourne. That's the kind of style they're going for these Bonds. So if Kingsman proves successful and brings back that fun, gadgety element to the spy genre, do you think after Craig is done, we'll get a James Bond movie that sort of falls back in line with that?
Good point. I mean, maybe I can't ever see them shooting some of the fight sequences or action sequences with the camera styles that they do in this one. The way that they rotate, the way they come in and out, the way they are close up on the actors. I don't know if they'd ever draw much from the sensibilities of this.
Well, I'm thinking more kind of maybe like tone, like less like depressing, like I don't want to kill, like, I don't know. Craig's James Bond is a lot more brooding, I think, than a lot of other James Bonds that have been out there. And it's definitely taking a more realistic approach to it, where there's a lot less gadgets that were, a hallmark for James Bond in the earlier films and stuff like that. He was all gadgeted out. And I think if, something like Kingsman that uses those things in their movie that people enjoy, if Bond is looking for something to emulate, this is something that's close to, what they've done before. I feel like they could, because I don't think it doesn't make sense to do the next Daniel Craig movie and start bringing these elements into that movie after that tone has already been established for 4 movies.
True.
I think they have to wait to recast Bond again before they try to reboot the tone and the way the universe is done. But I think if you want to get, at least me, a little bit more interested in that franchise, I think bringing the gadgets and the fun tone back into James Bond, I think would be because I've seen, not that I've seen a lot of, or that I can remember a lot of Roger Moore James Bond, but I've seen Kingsman compared to the tone and style of Roger Moore type James Bonds that are a little bit more campy and don't take itself as seriously. And that's the type of tone I guess I can see them trying to go with for another James Bond eventually.
Okay.
So yeah, I think something like that could be fun. We'll have to wait and see, because I don't know. I don't actually know. Is Craig signed on for 1 more or 2 more? Because I've heard different reports.
I believe just 1 more.
Okay, that's what I was going with. But all right, so we'll get Bond 25, and then we'll see what they do after that, and how quickly they recast Bond, and hopefully that one we'll see a little bit different stuff going on. We'll see how closely at that point it resembles Kingsman, and if it's something worth talking about.
Yeah.
All right, so final thoughts on the movie, and we'll try to give it a score out of 10. What do you think?
Like I said, sequels always have heavy lifting to do. I think I would give it a 7. I don't think it failed horribly in any major areas. It maybe didn't raise the bar anywhere in the way that the first one seemed innovative. I mean, it's always hard to follow. Not only do sequels have a hurdle to get over to begin with, but especially when it's a sequel to something that absolutely looked original and very different, where do you go from there? So it had a hard task ahead of itself, and I think just because it didn't make like an extra leap to somewhere else, it didn't go higher, but I'd definitely give it a good 7.
Yeah, I actually think I'm going to agree with a lot of what you just said, and that I was looking at 7 too, I think, for my score. Again, I feel like I'm nitpicking, but nitpicking is different than like outright hating a movie. I think I don't want to get that confused or anything. I did like this movie. I think it's on par with the first one. The first one I think is still better to me. I think it did a lot more things right, and like Josh was saying, I think it was the first of its kind, so it stood out a lot more than this one.
Mm-hmm.
This one hit my expectations. Like it's what I expected to see in a movie like this. But like you said, I didn't feel like it did too much different or anything that really stood out to me that was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's the less logical step for the way this is going to go. But again, that being said, I am fully looking forward to, if they do a third one, I will be there opening weekend for that one too. And that will probably make my anticipated list if they announce that too.
Same.
So yeah, we're giving it a solid C grade.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. Right, so I think that's where we'll wrap it up for this one. Hopefully you've enjoyed another one of our movie reviews. We'll see. I don't know what's coming up to try to do another one of these. I feel like we probably won't hit anything until like November for the big ones.
Maybe, it depends. I mean, there's a lot of good horror movies coming out in October, and if I know that's not your wheelhouse, but
yeah, I can't. I won't be able to contribute anything with those.
I mean, there's a lot of good ones. The Jigsaw, Saw reboot, re-entry
is that this year?
up. Yeah, that's the Friday before Halloween.
Oh wow! Okay.
There's a really cool crime thriller called The Snowman in October.
Fassbender.
Yep, there's a Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw kind of origins.
Oh, fuck that.
They're but to the degree that like these actually look really well done. Like if you're a horror fan, these look really well done. So I think they're going to be cool. So if anybody wants to jump on and tear those apart with me, we can definitely do that. Otherwise, yeah, I think it's going to be till like Thor is the beginning of November. Justice League is there.
Yeah, those are the 2 big ones in November that I can think of, and they're like 2 weeks apart. So we'll get the movie review, and then we'll cover something else, and then movie review. That's the way it's going to be in November. And I think if the rumors are true, from what I've been seeing, we're going to get another Star Wars trailer on October 9th during Monday Night Football.
Oh,
so in 2 weeks' time, we might be talking about another Star Wars trailer. Really, I don't watch the game. I just watch YouTube and like refresh until it pops up.
Yeah, I would say I'll you text me once it's available, and I'll go.
Oh, believe me, I'll be posting that everywhere as soon as it's up.
Exactly. You tell me. You text me and tell me, hey, I posted it, and then I'll watch it because I'm not even gonna suffer through any of that.
Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, that's something. At least something. If the rumors are true, that hopefully we'll cover in the next couple of weeks and see what we can do for there. As of next week, I don't know. I'll wing it and see what we come up with. I got nothing on tap right now. So that's it for this. If you've enjoyed the show, please stop by iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and review. Be sure to share, subscribe, favorite the show wherever you find us. As always, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/BryGuySuperFriends. And you can send us questions there, any types of comments you have for the show, topic suggestions, anything like that. We are also available through email, bryguysuperfriends@gmail.com, or you can tweet us on Twitter at BGSuperFriends, which I just found out the other day that you now can have 280 characters or 260 characters for Twitter now instead of 160.
Oh, God. Do you know how bad that is going to be for the leadership of this country?
That's true. I was just starting to think, like, I can put so many hashtags when I post the podcast on Twitter now. Because I can only ever fit like one or two before I run out of characters.
You can. So that's where you see more hashtag real estate.
That's right.
Nice.
Not that it makes a difference, but we'll see. All right. So on behalf of Josh and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.